The rotting oak smelled like death and mushrooms. Private First Class Eddie Brennan had been breathing that smell for 3 hours, lying motionless inside a hollow log while centipedes crawled across his neck and his left leg screamed with numbness. Through the scope of his Springfield rifle, he watched 13 German soldiers establish a machine gun position 60 yards away. They moved with the confidence of men who owned this forest. The Feldwebel with the scarred face directed placement with sharp hand signals. The MG-42 went onto its tripod, ammunition belts coiled in neat loops. They were building a killing position, and they had no idea an American was watching. At 8:47 a.m. on September 18, 1944, the machine gun crew finished their work. Brennan did the math in his head. Baker Company would advance down that trail at 1100 hours, 143 men. The MG-42 fired 1,200 rounds per minute. Most of Baker Company would die in the first 30 seconds. His orders were explicit. Observe and report. Do not engage unless compromised. Captain Holloway had been clear about that, but reporting took time, and time was something Baker Company didn't have. The log had been Brennan's idea. Not the kind of idea you find in field manuals or tactical training. The kind you find when you've spent enough nights watching friends die to machine guns they never saw. The Hurtgen forest had been eating American soldiers since September. Dense canopy blocked artillery observers. Interlocking German positions turned every advance into a slaughter. Standard doctrine said snipers positioned 200 to 300 yards behind advancing infantry, providing overwatch. But in forests this thick, you couldn't see past 50 yards. Brennan had tried explaining this to Captain Holloway a week earlier, suggesting he infiltrate forward of friendly lines, establish hide positions deep in German territory. Holloway had looked at him like he'd suggested charging Berlin alone. Eddie Brennan learned patience in the strip mine wastelands east of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, hunting groundhogs with a single-shot .22 his grandfather had carried in the Great War. Ammunition cost money the family didn't have after a ladle accident crushed his father's legs at the Bethlehem steel blast furnace in 1936. Every shot had to count. Sometimes he'd wait 4 hours for one groundhog, sometimes all day. He discovered that absolute stillness made him invisible. Once, 2 mine police walked within 15 feet of where he sat motionless against a slag pile, searching for trespassers. They gave up after 20 minutes, never seeing him. When he enlisted in December 1942, the recruiter asked what skills he had. Brennan said he could shoot and stay still. The recruiter laughed and stamped his papers for infantry. By September 1944, Brennan had survived North Africa, Sicily, and Normandy. A lieutenant noticed he'd made 8 kills in 3 days during the hedgerow fighting, all single shots over 300 yards. They gave him a Springfield with a universal scope and told him to keep doing what he was doing. What he'd been doing wasn't working anymore. The Hurtgen forest operated by different rules. The Germans had transformed 50 square miles of dense woodland into a killing maze. Interlocking fields of fire, pre-sighted artillery coordinates, machine gun nests in log bunkers. American mortars couldn't penetrate, snipers in tree platforms, minefields disguised as forest trails. American doctrine said advance in company strength. Clear each strong point with infantry assault supported by artillery. American casualties said that doctrine was killing them faster than the Germans. In 3 weeks, Brennan's battalion lost 97 men. He kept a list, not just numbers, but names. PFC Tommy Adler from Brooklyn shot through the neck while trying to flank a bunker. Sergeant Frank Yablonsky from Detroit stepped on a shoe mine and bled out before the medic could reach him. Corporal James Harper from San Francisco killed by tree-burst artillery that detonated in the canopy and rained shrapnel down on his squad. Brennan had tried to help from his standard sniper position 200 yards behind the advance, but the forest blocked his sight lines. He couldn't see targets, couldn't protect his unit. Just listen to the gunfire and waited for casualty reports. After Harper died, Brennan went to Captain Holloway. The captain listened to his proposal about forward infiltration, then delivered the institutional response. "Snipers don't operate independently in this Army. You're not a partisan. You're not a one-man war. You're part of a unit, and units function through coordination and command structure." Brennan saluted and left. That night in his foxhole, he did different math. 30 men a week to ambushes, 4 weeks until rotation. 120 more names on his list, unless something changed. First Sergeant McKenna, a coal miner from West Virginia who'd survived Kasserine Pass, by ignoring a colonel's order to hold position, sent Brennan to Lieutenant Hayes. Hayes was 23, Harvard-educated, with the haunted look of someone who'd just learned his education was worthless. He listened to Brennan's proposal, then asked 3 questions. Can you infiltrate to position without being detected? Can you survive 12 hours alone in German territory? Can you exfiltrate if compromised? Brennan said yes to all 3. He didn't mention he'd never done any of them. Hayes opened a map case and pointed to a sector 300 yards into German-held forest. Baker Company advances down this trail at 1100 tomorrow. Intelligence indicates Germans have established positions along this ridge. I need locations, strength estimates, weapon types. You'll insert, observe, exfiltrate after dark. Observe only. Do not engage unless compromised. If you're captured, you are acting without orders. Brennan understood perfectly. Hayes was giving him deniable authorization. If Brennan succeeded, Hayes would claim credit. If Brennan failed, Hayes would deny knowledge. The previous night, Brennan had walked the forest edge under moonlight, looking for something specific, though he couldn't have explained what. After 30 minutes, he found it. A massive oak log, fallen years ago, rotted hollow, lying parallel to what would be the German approach route. He knelt and peered inside. The interior had decomposed into soft punk wood, but the outer shell remained intact. The log had several natural knotholes. One faced the direction Germans would approach. Another provided a view downrange. From 20 yards, it looked like forest debris. From 10 yards, it still looked like forest debris. At 03:15, 2 privates from the recon platoon escorted him to the log. One of them, Private Angelo, said, "You're going to die in there, Brennan. You know that, right?" Brennan said, "Probably not today." He entered feet first at 03:30. The interior was tighter than estimated. His shoulders scraped rotted wood. Centipedes and beetles scattered. Something larger, maybe a rat, bolted past his face. He positioned himself with his rifle barrel protruding through the knothole. Through his scope, he had a 60-yard field of fire covering the approach trail and a small clearing. He waited for dawn. By 08:47, the Germans arrived, 13 soldiers. The Feldwebel directed them with hand signals. Professional, confident, routine. They'd done this before. Brennan observed as his orders required. Machine gun position established at 9:03. Ammunition count estimated at 2,000 rounds based on visible belt containers. Crew of 4. Supporting infantry spread in a semicircle covering approaches. Radio operator visible with pack set. The Feldwebel had a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. At 09:45, a German soldier walked directly toward Brennan's log. Brennan stopped breathing. The soldier was maybe 19, thin face, needed a shave. He stopped 6 feet from the log, unbuttoned his trousers, and urinated on the ferns. Brennan watched through the scope. He could see individual buttons on the soldier's tunic. The kid finished, buttoned up, walked back to position. Brennan's heart hammered against the rotting wood, but his breathing stayed controlled. At 10:15, Baker Company began their approach. Brennan couldn't see them, but he could hear the rustle of equipment, whispered commands, the distinctive metallic click of M1 Garand bolts. They were following the trail exactly as planned. They would pass directly through the MG-42's killing zone in approximately 10 minutes. 14 Germans, 143 Americans, machine gun with pre-sighted fields of fire. His orders were to observe and report, but reporting took time. By the time he exfiltrated, found friendly lines, reported coordinates, and artillery was called in, Baker Company would already be engaged. Half of them would be dead or wounded. The other half would be pinned down, easy targets for German mortars, unless someone stopped the machine gun. Brennan adjusted his scope. Range 62 yards, wind negligible under canopy. Target, machine gunner's head visible above the weapon's shield. Easy shot for his skill level. Consequence, disobeying direct orders, revealing his position, fighting alone against 13 enemy soldiers with no support and no retreat option. Court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison, or follow orders, exfiltrate, report, watch Baker Company get slaughtered. His finger touched the trigger. The Springfield weighed 8 pounds. The trigger required 4 pounds of pressure, 2 pounds, 3 pounds. He thought about Tommy Adler, Frank Yablonsky, James Harper, 97 names on his list. He thought about Captain Holloway saying units function through coordination and command structure. He thought about his father's legs crushed by a ladle because some engineer had calculated the chain strength wrong and decided profits mattered more than safety. Sometimes the system kills you. Sometimes you break the system. He exhaled half a breath, held it, squeezed. The Springfield cracked. The machine gunner's head snapped back. He dropped behind the weapon. The other Germans froze for 1 second, the universal pause of soldiers processing sudden death. That second cost them. Brennan worked the bolt. The spent casing ejected, new round chambered. He acquired the second machine gunner, the one reaching for the weapon. Range unchanged. Squeeze. The second gunner fell across the first. Now the Germans reacted. Shouts in German. Soldiers dove for cover. The Feldwebel screamed orders. Brennan shifted aim. Radio operator reaching for handset. Squeeze. The operator collapsed onto his equipment. 9 seconds. 3 shots. 3 kills. The Germans had no idea where the fire was coming from. The Feldwebel started directing fire at likely sniper positions. The ridgeline, the trees, the bunker to the east. Nowhere near the log. The Germans poured rifle fire into empty forest. Brennan acquired a soldier firing from behind a tree, adjusted for the angle, squeezed. 4 kills, 15 seconds. A German private figured it out. He turned and stared directly at the log, mouth opening to shout. Brennan shot him through the chest. The private went down, but the others saw where he'd been looking. Rifle fire converged on the log. Bullets punched through rotted wood 6 inches above Brennan's head. Splinters rained down. The log shook with impacts. Brennan pressed himself flat against the bottom, waiting for the volley to pass. It passed. The Germans couldn't maintain fire. They were exposed, and they didn't know if there were other American snipers positioned. The Feldwebel made the smart decision. Withdrawal. He screamed orders. The remaining 8 soldiers began falling back by pairs, suppressive fire covering movement. Brennan rose to his elbows, acquired a soldier retreating, led the movement, squeezed. The soldier fell. Brennan worked the bolt, acquired another, squeezed. 7 left. They were running now, abandoning the machine gun, abandoning their dead. Brennan tracked the Feldwebel. The man was moving in a combat crouch, professional, head swiveling to maintain awareness. Range 80 yards and increasing. Difficult shot through forest understory. Brennan led him by 2 feet, squeezed. The Feldwebel dropped. The remaining 6 Germans vanished into the forest. Brennan counted to 60. No movement. No sound except Baker Company approaching from the south. He secured his rifle and began extracting himself from the log. It took 3 minutes of painful squirming. His legs had gone completely numb. When he finally pulled himself free, he couldn't stand. He sat against the log, working circulation back into his calves, and counted. 14 shots fired, 8 confirmed kills, probably 9. The chest shot was fatal, but the soldier had fallen behind cover. Machine gun position neutralized. Radio operator dead, so no warning transmitted to German command. Baker Company emerged from the forest at 11:02 hours. Lieutenant Strickland, their CO, found Brennan sitting against the log, rifle across his lap. Strickland stared at the German bodies, then at Brennan, then back at the bodies. "What the hell happened here, Brennan?" "They were setting up an ambush, sir. I stopped it. You were supposed to observe and report." "Yes, sir. Not engage." "Yes, sir." Strickland walked to the machine gun position, examined the bodies, looked at the MG-42's field of fire, perfectly aligned with the trail his company had just walked down. He returned to Brennan. "How many?" 8 confirmed, 1 probable, 5 escaped. Strickland was quiet for a moment. "Then you saved my company." "Just following doctrine, sir, neutralizing threats to friendly forces." "That's not doctrine, that's—" "I don't know what that is." Strickland keyed his radio. "Baker 6 to Battalion, contact at Grid Echo 7. Multiple enemy KIA, positions neutralized, requesting instructions." The radio crackled, Captain Holloway's voice. "Baker 6, identify who made contact." Strickland looked at Brennan. "PFC Brennan, sir." Long pause, then send him to Battalion HQ immediately. Brennan arrived at Battalion HQ at 13:40 hours. Captain Holloway was waiting outside the command tent with Lieutenant Hayes and First Sergeant McKenna. Holloway's face was red. Hayes looked worried. McKenna's expression was unreadable. Holloway didn't wait. "You disobeyed direct orders." "Yes, sir." "You engaged enemy forces when explicitly told not to." "Yes, sir." "You operated independently, risking compromise of your position and endangering battalion intelligence operations." "Yes, sir." "You also neutralized a machine gun position that would have eliminated or wounded approximately half of Baker Company." If you've found this account compelling so far, consider engaging with this content. Now back to what happened at Battalion HQ. Holloway pulled a folded map from his pocket. "Lieutenant Hayes, explain." Hayes spread the map on a field table. "Germans have been establishing ambush positions along predictable advance routes. This is the 3rd time this week we've encountered pre-sighted machine gun positions covering forest trails. Intelligence estimates they've been responsible for 60% of our casualties in this sector." Holloway pointed at the map. "We've been trying to predict these positions based on terrain analysis and signal intelligence. We've been wrong 3 times, cost us 42 men. He looked at Brennan. "You found one." "How?" "Infiltrated forward of our lines, found a hide position, waited for them to arrive, in a hollow log." "Yes, sir." "For 6 hours, closer to 7, sir." Holloway stared at him. "That's insane." "It worked, sir." McKenna cleared his throat. "Captain, permission to speak." "Go ahead, Sergeant. In 3 weeks, we've lost 97 men to German ambushes. Brennan eliminated 1 ambush position and saved Baker Company. If we're court-martialing him for that, we should court-martial every officer who followed standard doctrine and got soldiers killed." Holloway's jaw tightened. "That's not how the Army works, Sergeant. Maybe it should be, sir." Silence. Wind moved through the forest canopy. Somewhere distant, artillery rumbled. Hayes spoke carefully. "Sir, I gave Brennan authorization to infiltrate and observe. He exceeded those orders, but the result was successful. If we punish him, we're telling every soldier in this battalion that initiative gets you court-martialed." Holloway paced. "If I let this stand, every sniper in Third Army will think they can operate independently. We'll have chaos, no coordination, no command structure." Or, McKenna said, "We'll have soldiers who take initiative when they see American lives in danger." More silence. Holloway looked at Brennan. "You understand you should be facing a court-martial right now." "Yes, sir." "You disobeyed direct orders." "Yes, sir." "And you'd do it again, wouldn't you?" Brennan didn't hesitate. "If it saved American lives, yes, sir." Holloway exhaled slowly. "Get out of my sight, Brennan. Report to Lieutenant Hayes for mission planning. If you're going to be a cowboy, you're going to be a supervised cowboy." Word spread fast. By evening, every rifle company in the battalion knew Brennan had been inside a hollow log for 7 hours and eliminated 8 Germans before they could ambush Baker Company. Soldiers who had been ready to call him crazy started asking questions. Private Angelo, one of the scouts who'd escorted Brennan to the log, told his squad. The squad told their platoon. By nightfall, platoon sergeants were asking Battalion HQ if they could get sniper support using forward hide positions. Staff Sergeant Marcus Wheeler from Charlie Company found Brennan after evening chow. Wheeler was 31, a construction foreman from Georgia who'd helped build half the bunkers at Fort Benning. He sat down on Brennan's foxhole rim without asking. Need to know how you did it. Did what? Found the position, the log. How'd you know it would work? Brennan cleaned his rifle while he talked. Germans set ambushes where they expect us to advance. That means trails, clearings, anywhere that channels movement. If you want to stop them, you need to get there first and wait. But you can't dig in. They'll spot fresh earth. You can't climb trees. They own the canopy. You need something that's already there, something they'll ignore, like a log, like anything. Logs, rock formations, deadfall piles, burned-out vehicles, anything that's been there long enough to look natural. Wheeler nodded slowly. Charlie Company pushes east tomorrow. Germans have been hitting us from a bunker complex near Grid Delta 4. You think this would work there? Depends on terrain. Show me. They spent an hour looking at maps. Wheeler pointed out the approach route, known German positions, likely ambush sites. Brennan identified 3 potential hide positions: a collapsed barn foundation, a drainage culvert, and a cluster of boulders on the German side of the line. Wheeler said, "I want to try it. Got a designated marksman in my platoon, kid named Taylor. Good shot. Can you teach him?" "Teach him what?" "How to be you?" Brennan almost laughed. "It's not complicated. Find cover that doesn't look like cover. Get there before dawn. Stay still. Wait for targets. Don't move until you have a shot that matters. That's it. That's it. Oh, and be willing to wait 8 hours in a hole that smells like death and is full of centipedes." Wheeler grinned. Taylor grew up on a farm. He's used to smelling like manure. Private Taylor inserted into a collapsed barn foundation on September 21st at Fort Worth. The barn had burned during American artillery preparation, leaving only stone foundation walls 2 feet high. Taylor positioned himself in a corner, covered himself with charred lumber and canvas, and waited. At 0920, a German patrol established an observation post 30 yards from his position. 6 soldiers, one with binoculars calling coordinates, for mortar fire. Taylor waited until the observer completed his first call, then shot him through the head. He eliminated 2 more before the patrol broke and ran. Charlie Company advanced through that sector with 0 casualties. Word spread wider. By September 25th, 7 snipers across the battalion were using forward hide positions, 3 in logs, 2 in drainage culverts, 1 in a burned-out Sturmgeschütz III, 1 inside a latrine pit the Germans had abandoned. Results were immediate and measurable. September 1st through 20th, average daily casualties from ambush 4.2. September 21st through 30th, average daily casualties from ambush 1.8. Battalion S2 compiled a report. Estimated enemy ambush positions neutralized 14. Estimated American lives saved 63. Method: forward infiltration using natural concealment. Originator: PFC Edward Brennan. Captain Holloway forwarded the report to regiment. Regiment forwarded to division. Division buried it. No official response, no doctrine change, no training bulletin, just silence. But soldiers don't need official approval. They need what works. On October 3rd, a German Gefreiter named Otto Richter wrote a letter to his wife that was intercepted by Allied intelligence. The Americans have changed tactics. Their snipers no longer position behind their lines. They infiltrate our territory during night, establish positions we cannot detect, and wait for us to expose ourselves. Yesterday we lost 8 men to a sniper we could not locate. The men are calling him Der Geist, the ghost. They found his position after he withdrew. A hollow tree stump, perfectly natural, impossible to distinguish from surrounding forest. This is not how Americans fight. Something has changed. German tactical documents from early October show a pattern. Increased caution during dawn operations, mandatory searches of natural cover before establishing positions, reduced reliance on predictable ambush sites. The Americans had introduced randomness into a system the Germans had optimized for efficiency. It disrupted their operational rhythm. A Luftwaffe reconnaissance report dated October 8th noted American sniper activity has increased significantly in Hürtgen sector. Recommend all ground forces conduct thorough reconnaissance before establishing static positions. Enemy demonstrates willingness to infiltrate deep into our territory and remain concealed for extended periods. The Germans never figured out the hollow log. They found concealment positions after they'd been vacated, logs, culverts, foundation walls, vehicle wrecks, but they never developed a reliable method to detect them before engagement. The problem was mathematical. The forest contained thousands of potential hide sites, and searching all of them before every operation was logistically impossible. By mid-October, German units in the Hürtgen sector had adjusted their doctrine. They stopped using predictable ambush positions. They increased patrol frequency. They moved more carefully, all of which meant they eliminated fewer Americans per engagement because they were too busy protecting themselves to maintain offensive pressure. The ripple effect was working. On October 12th, Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, the battalion XO, finally asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Should we formalize this? He was sitting in the command tent with Captain Holloway, Lieutenant Hayes, and First Sergeant McKenna. Outside, rain hammered the forest. Inside, they studied casualty reports and S2 summaries. Webb continued, "We have 12 snipers operating independently using forward infiltration tactics. No official doctrine, no training standardization, no oversight. It's working, but it's chaos. Holloway said if we formalize it, we own it." Right now, if something goes wrong, it's individual soldier initiative. If we make it official doctrine and a sniper gets captured and executed as a spy, we're responsible. Hayes nodded. Germans consider soldiers operating behind their lines in civilian clothes or disguised positions to be partisans, not lawful combatants. There's precedent for summary execution. McKenna leaned back. Brennan's been doing this for 3 weeks. Taylor, Rodriguez, Williams, 8 others. None captured, none eliminated in position. Success rate is 100%. At some point, we need to admit it works and stop pretending it's accidental. Webb studied the map. Division won't approve it. Too unconventional. Violates every principle of sniper employment in the field manual. But regiment might look the other way if results continue. So we let it continue unofficially, Holloway asked. We let it continue, Webb said, but we establish guidelines. Maximum infiltration range, required check-in protocols, exfiltration procedures if compromised. We don't call it doctrine. We call it operational guidelines for designated marksmen in restricted terrain. Hayes smiled. That's the most bureaucratic thing I've ever heard. That's how you get things done in this army, Webb said. You don't change doctrine. You create guidelines that everyone ignores the old doctrine to follow. The guidelines were distributed on October 15th as a mimeographed 2-page document titled Technical Bulletin HQ 44, Designated Marksman Employment in High-Density Forest Environments. It didn't mention hollow logs or forward infiltration. It simply stated, designated marksmen may establish observation positions forward of friendly lines when terrain restricts conventional overwatch capabilities, provided communication protocols are maintained and exfiltration routes are established prior to insertion. Translation: do what Brennan's doing, but tell someone where you are. By November 1st, 19 snipers across 3rd Army's 15th Corps were using forward infiltration tactics. Battalion S2 sections compiled a collective report. Before forward infiltration, September 1st through 20th, enemy ambush casualties 127, ambush positions neutralized 3, average warning time 0 minutes. After forward infiltration, September 21st through October 31st, enemy ambush casualties 47, ambush positions neutralized 31, average warning time 15 minutes, allowing artillery response. The math was simple. Forward infiltration had reduced ambush casualties by 63%. Conservative estimates credited the tactic with saving approximately 200 American lives in 6 weeks. Nobody thanked Brennan. Technical Bulletin HQ-44 didn't mention his name. The S2 report attributed the success to improved intelligence gathering and tactical adaptation to terrain conditions. Headquarters found it easier to claim institutional credit than acknowledge a private first class had forced them to rewrite doctrine. Brennan didn't care. He kept doing what he'd been doing, inserting into forward positions before dawn, waiting, shooting Germans who tried to ambush his friends. On November 8th, he made his 23rd infiltration, a collapsed root cellar 400 yards into German territory. He spent 11 hours inside, eliminated 4 Germans setting up a mortar position, exfiltrated at dusk. Routine operation, just another day. Except that morning, First Sergeant McKenna had recommended him for the Silver Star. Captain Holloway approved it. Lieutenant Colonel Webb signed off. The recommendation went to Division. Division disapproved it. Reason given: insufficient documentation of actions under fire. Translation: we're not giving medals to soldiers who violate doctrine, even when it works. The Hurtgen Forest campaign ended in December 1944. American casualties, approximately 33,000. German casualties, approximately 28,000. Tactical outcome, inconclusive. The forest remained a killing ground until Allied forces bypassed it entirely during the spring 1945 offensive, but in one battalion of the 28th Infantry Division, casualties from ambush dropped by 63%. Between September and December 1944, in that battalion, soldiers stopped dying to machine guns they never saw. They stopped walking into kill zones designed by Germans who understood the terrain better than American planners. They stopped being predictable. They learned to be ghosts. By war's end, forward infiltration tactics had spread to 7 divisions across 3rd and 7th Armies. Official doctrine never changed. The 1943 field manual remained in effect, but training sections quietly began teaching reconnaissance and force techniques that looked suspiciously like what Brennan had invented in a Pennsylvania salvage yard and perfected in a German forest. After Germany surrendered, the Army conducted operational analysis studies. One report, classified until 1954, examined sniper effectiveness in European theater operations. It noted unconventional employment of designated marksmen in forward concealment positions demonstrated significant tactical advantage in high-density terrain. Recommend further study for incorporation into post-war doctrine revision. The study didn't mention Brennan. It didn't need to. By 1954, every sniper school in the U.S. military taught forward infiltration as standard doctrine. They called it hide site selection and establishment. They taught it with training manuals and classroom instruction. They made it official. They just forgot where it came from. Eddie Brennan survived the war. He was discharged in October 1945 at Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, with final rank of sergeant and a combat infantryman badge. No Silver Star, no official recognition for saving 200 lives. Just an honorable discharge and a train ticket to Pennsylvania. He went home to Johnstown and took a job at the same salvage yard where he'd worked before the war. He married a nurse named Helen, whom he'd known in high school. They had 3 children. He never talked about the hollow log, never mentioned the 14 Germans he'd eliminated in 4 hours, never explained why he'd get quiet sometimes in the fall, when leaves covered the ground and the forest smell came through the windows. In 1963, a military historian researching unconventional tactics in World War II found Technical Bulletin HQ-44 in Army archives. The historian traced its origin through after-action reports and S2 summaries back to a single incident in September 1944, an unnamed PFC who'd neutralized a machine gun position while operating alone from inside a hollow log. The historian spent 2 years tracking down witnesses, interviewing veterans, cross-referencing unit rosters. He found Eddie Brennan operating a crane at Johnstown Salvage and Scrap, age 42, 2 days from retirement. The historian asked if Brennan remembered September 18, 1944. Brennan said, "Can't say I do." What happened that day? The historian showed him the S2 report, the casualty statistics, the doctrine changes that followed. He explained how forward infiltration tactics were now taught at Fort Benning and Quantico, how thousands of soldiers had been trained in techniques Brennan had invented, how modern sniper doctrine traced directly back to that hollow log in the Hurtgen forest. Brennan read the documents, finally said, "That's interesting. Is there anything you want to say about it?" the historian asked. "Not really. You saved hundreds of lives, changed how the Army fights. You're a significant figure in military history." Brennan handed the documents back. "I just didn't want to watch any more kids die." That's all it was. The historian published his findings in a 1967 academic paper, The Evolution of American Sniper Doctrine, 1944-1965. The paper identified Brennan by name as the originator of forward infiltration tactics and credited him with approximately 200 lives, saved through direct and indirect results of his innovation. The paper was read by approximately 1,400 people, mostly military historians and tactical instructors. Nobody sent Brennan a copy. Eddie Brennan died in April 1992 at age 71 from complications of emphysema. The Johnstown Tribune-Democrat ran a 4-paragraph obituary noting he was a World War II veteran, worked 47 years in salvage, survived by wife Helen, 3 children, 7 grandchildren. One sentence mentioned he'd served as an infantry sniper. The obituary didn't mention the hollow log, didn't mention Technical Bulletin HQ-44, didn't mention the 200 lives saved, or the doctrine that changed because a 22-year-old kid from the salvage yards decided sometimes you break the rules to save your friends. His funeral was attended by 43 people. No military honor guard, no flag ceremony. Just family and co-workers and a few old soldiers who knew him before he went to war. They buried him in Grandview Cemetery, overlooking the valley where Bethlehem Steel used to stand, where his father had worked the furnaces, where Eddie had learned that systems sometimes fail, and when they do, someone has to act. In 2015, the Army Sniper School at Fort Benning unveiled a memorial honoring the development of American sniper doctrine. The memorial featured 7 bronze plaques describing key innovations in sniper tactics from World War I through Iraq. Plaque 4 detailed forward infiltration and hide site utilization as developed during World War II European operations. The plaque didn't mention Eddie Brennan. It credited tactical evolution in response to operational requirements. But understanding how warfare actually changes requires looking beyond plaques and official histories. The British had experimented with camouflage trees during World War I, building fake observation posts inside artificial tree trunks, erected under cover of darkness to replace real trees. The French pioneered the technique, and British forces refined it. Engineers would photograph a dead tree near enemy lines, build a hollow steel replica in a workshop, then replace the real tree with the fake one during night operations covered by artillery fire. These observation posts allowed Allied soldiers to watch German movements from elevated positions. Some contained periscopes, telephones, or weapons. The installations worked, but they were elaborate, expensive, and required significant engineering support. 15 camoufleurs were killed installing fake trees on the Western Front. What Brennan understood, sitting in that salvage yard thinking about machine guns and dead friends, was that you didn't need engineering teams and steel fabrication. The forest was full of natural concealment if you knew how to see it. A log that had been lying there for years didn't look like a threat. It looked like part of the landscape. The Germans would walk past it, set up their ambush, never suspecting an American was inside, watching them through a scope. The genius wasn't in the construction. The genius was in the simplicity. By 1944, sniper doctrine in all armies had evolved significantly from World War I improvisation. The Soviets led in systematic sniper training, establishing schools that taught patience, camouflage, and target selection. Soviet snipers like Vasily Zaitsev, credited with over 200 kills at Stalingrad, demonstrated the psychological impact skilled marksmen could achieve. German snipers in Normandy favored small independent teams operating in bocage country, where hedgerows provided natural concealment. They focused on high-value targets, officers, radio operators, machine gunners. In multiple documented cases, a single German sniper stalled an American battalion for hours after removing only 2 or 3 key personnel. The Germans understood that disrupting command and control could paralyze units larger than themselves. American doctrine lagged behind. The U.S. military entered World War II without a comprehensive sniper program. Designated marksmen received better rifles and scopes, but training emphasized marksmanship over fieldcraft. The doctrinal position, 200 to 300 yards behind advancing infantry, made sense on open terrain where sight lines extended for miles. In North African desert or Sicilian hills, American snipers could observe enemy positions and provide effective overwatch. But the Hurtgen Forest wasn't North Africa. The canopy blocked observation. The density channeled movement. Standard positions were useless. What Brennan pioneered was adapting sniper employment to terrain rather than forcing terrain to fit doctrine. Forward infiltration wasn't new in concept. Scouts and reconnaissance patrols operated behind enemy lines routinely. What was new was combining deep infiltration with long-duration static concealment and precision fire. Scouts moved. Brennan stayed still. Scouts gathered information. Brennan became part of the landscape. When German soldiers urinated 6 feet from his log, when they established their machine gun position and settled in for the ambush, they weren't being careless. They were operating in what they believed was secure territory, following their own doctrine, setting up the same way they'd set up successfully a dozen times before. Brennan broke their pattern by refusing to be where doctrine said he should be. The math that followed was brutal and simple. Machine gun crew exposed at close range. No supporting fire, no cover from the direction of attack. Brennan could see them. They couldn't see him. In the first 15 seconds, he eliminated the machine gun crew and the radio operator, removing the Germans' primary weapon and their ability to call for support. The remaining soldiers faced an invisible enemy. They returned fire at empty forest because human instinct demands action when being shot at. But instinct doesn't identify targets that don't reveal themselves. The Feldwebel made the correct tactical decision: withdrawal. His men were dying to an enemy he couldn't locate, in a position they'd believed was secure. Staying would mean complete annihilation. The German after-action analysis, visible in Otto Richter's intercepted letter, and subsequent tactical adjustments, shows they understood something had changed. American snipers were infiltrating deep into German territory and remaining undetected for extended periods. This violated American tactical patterns the Germans had learned to predict. It introduced uncertainty into their planning. If Americans could be anywhere, hiding in natural terrain features that couldn't be distinguished from the surrounding forest, then nowhere was secure. German units responded by increasing caution, searching potential hide sites, avoiding predictable positions. all of which slowed their operations and reduced their effectiveness. This is how tactical innovation spreads, not through official channels and doctrinal manuals, but through soldiers recognizing what works and adapting it to their situations. Wheeler saw what Brennan had done and immediately understood the application to his own company's problems. Taylor learned the technique and executed it successfully. Other snipers across the battalion experimented with different hide sites, drainage culverts, burned vehicles, collapsed buildings, abandoned latrines. They discovered that almost any natural feature could work if the concealment was good enough and the patience was sufficient. The common factor wasn't the specific hide site. The common factor was the willingness to infiltrate forward, stay motionless for hours, and wait for the moment when a single shot could change the outcome of an engagement. Battalion staff faced a dilemma. Official doctrine said, snipers don't operate independently. Training manuals specified positioning and employment. But the casualties said doctrine was failing and innovation was working. Lieutenant Colonel Webb's solution, creating guidelines without changing doctrine, represented institutional adaptation. The Army couldn't officially admit that a private first class had discovered a better method than what field manuals prescribed, but they could create technical bulletins that allowed the method to continue while maintaining the fiction of doctrinal consistency. Technical Bulletin HQ 44 didn't say, Brennan was right and the field manual was wrong. It said, in certain terrain conditions, alternative employment methods may be appropriate. The result was identical. The language preserved institutional authority. This pattern repeats throughout military history. Innovation comes from ground level, from soldiers who see problems field manuals don't address. Institutional adoption follows only when results become undeniable. Even then, credit flows upward to officers and headquarters, while originators remain anonymous. Brennan's name appeared in Lieutenant Hayes's S2 report, but disappeared from subsequent documents. By the time Technical Bulletin HQ 44 reached division level, the tactic had become improved intelligence gathering and tactical adaptation, as if battalions collectively decided to change methods rather than one soldier making a desperate choice to save his friends. The Silver Star recommendation that division rejected tells the complete story. First Sergeant McKenna, who'd survived Kasserine Pass by disobeying orders, recognized that Brennan deserved recognition. Captain Holloway, who'd initially threatened court-martial, approved the recommendation. Lieutenant Colonel Webb signed off. The chain of command at battalion level understood what Brennan had accomplished, but division staff saw only that Brennan had violated orders. The fact that violating orders saved 143 lives and changed how the battalion fought didn't matter. Doctrine matters. Orders matter. Individual soldiers don't get to decide when rules don't apply, even when they're right. Except Brennan did decide. That's the essential moment. Lying in the log, watching Germans set up the machine gun, hearing Baker Company approach, Brennan calculated the costs. Follow orders, report after exfiltration, call artillery, arrive too late, watch Baker Company get slaughtered. Break orders, engage now, save Baker Company, face court-martial. He chose the court-martial. He chose it knowing the consequences, accepting that saving lives might cost him everything. That calculation, made alone in a rotting log while centipedes crawled across his neck and his legs went numb, represents moral courage distinct from physical bravery. Physical courage means facing enemy fire. Brennan had done that in North Africa, Sicily, Normandy. Moral courage means choosing what's right over what's safe when systems and authorities say otherwise. Brennan learned that lesson watching his father's legs get crushed because company engineers' calculated profits mattered more than proper safety chains. He learned it again watching 97 soldiers die because doctrine said snipers stay behind friendly lines even when that positioning was useless. Systems fail sometimes catastrophically. When they do, someone has to act outside the system, accepting personal risk to prevent larger disaster. That's what Brennan did, not once, but 23 times, infiltrating forward positions through November while division staff debated guidelines and headquarters buried reports. The 200 lives saved represents conservative estimate based on casualty reduction data. September 1st through 20th, average 4.2 ambush casualties daily. September 21st through October 31st, average 1.8 ambush casualties daily. Difference, 2.4 casualties per day. Duration, 41 days. Total casualty reduction, approximately 98 soldiers. But that calculation only covers Brennan's battalion. 7 divisions eventually adopted forward infiltration tactics. If each achieved similar casualty reduction, and S2 data suggests they did, the total lives saved numbers in thousands. All traceable to September 18, 1944, to